Can you make videos on every religion that's got a history and explain its stories and the meaning of life in every religion, because it will be very thrilling and learnable for everyone? Of course, no problem at all. I've got 3 books to help us go through between 4,000 to 10,000 world religions, depending on who you ask, and thousands of years of religious stories, and I'm going to be the man, despite what you may have read on the internet and what you may have learnt from your priest or your imam. I'm going to be the man to give you the essence of the nature of God in just one video. We don't need multiple videos, probably don't even need 20 minutes, just these 3 books and my articulate tongue and my experiences. I'm kidding, it's an impossible task. I cannot make a video on the nature of God and give you anything like a truly living experience of the relationship to God. I can't do that. I've got 3 books I'm going to recommend to you. I'll just give you them right now. The World Religions by Houston Smith, Varieties of Religious Experience by William James, and The Transcendent Unity of Religions by a man whose name I still cannot pronounce. Read those 3 books in your own time. Today we're going to talk about the nature of God as I understand that phrase, that energy, that word, that concept, that essence, through my work with people who are resolving traumatic situations from the past. The reason I'm narrowing the conversation on the essence of God is that although I have read hundreds of books on spiritual psychology and the nature of God as it relates to our human experience, I don't think that you're going to build your personal living relationship to God through books. It's not going to happen. You can study the holy religions of the world, you can study the main 6 to 12 religions that exist in the world right now, and you're still not really going to get a living relationship to God. It's something which is built and learned, and it's something which is difficult to put into words, which is why I almost don't want to make this video, because I don't watch videos on the nature of God. I don't think it's very convincing to watch other people talking about the nature of God. I believe that it's something which needs to be lived. The way that I live my relationship to God, to the best of my understanding, is trying to live a devoted life of service to the best of my ability, to the best of my own health and the health of those that I care for. It's about treating my body and my mind and my soul as sacred and doing the same for other people. It's about being a good person. You don't need to get wrapped up in the stories of world religions. Of course, if you want to, you can do exactly what I've done, reading 3 books like these, reading hundreds of other books on spirituality and the sacred texts of all of human history. But ultimately, my actual lived relationship with God is met through serving clients in private sessions and the fact that I've read hundreds of books so that you don't have to. I'm trying to create something which will help you to heal. That's it. I try and honor my vessel, and I try and live a devoted path, which in the Eastern traditions is something like a karma yoga perspective, where you're truly aware of the energy that you're putting out and the energy that you will receive. It's about intention, but also intentional action. I could tell you the stories of Jesus Christ, and I could bring out a poetic illustration of a certain story about another prophet, but ultimately, the nature of God is something which you can only inquire within. It's in your own heart. It's in the immaterial realm. And you might say, if you're not a person of faith, well, how does God even exist? And does God even exist? And very much the rational atheist approach is, well, God does not exist, but in the same way that if you took the most atheistic person possible, let's say you took a hard-nosed lawyer who had no faith in God at all, has seen way too much trauma in the world, and they just don't care about any of those conversations, and they very proudly say, well, of course God doesn't exist, you can't measure it. And you were to say, well, Mr. Lawyer, do you love your wife? And he goes, oh, of course I love my wife. What a ridiculous question. You say, well, it's very interesting. How do you measure the love for your wife? Well, surely you can measure it, right? You can measure your love for your wife, and you can measure this thing called love. It's scientifically, objectifiably proven that you love your wife, right? Well, no, it's a feeling, right? There's the essence. The essence of God is feeling. It's a felt sense of divinity. This video is messy. This video is imprecise. The way that I explore and develop my relationship with God, which hasn't been easy, it wasn't given to me, I was raised atheist. I went through a certain spiritual journey, let's say, and I now come to a lived relationship with God where I get to apply something like the healing essence of that which is greater than humanity itself. Something like the immersion in the sacred realm, something like a fingerprint of divinity that marks each moment of the day with a little bit more colour, like all the sounds are just a little bit sharper and your smiles a little bit brighter. That's the lived relationship with God. It's seeing what's actually here and trying to engage with that in the light and the dark aspect. It's engaging with beauty and tragedy with a sense of earthy humility. I'm not the man to tell you the world stories. I'm not the man to represent any particular religious faith. But I can tell you that when I'm in a session, I think of a particular client who I worked with about a year ago. I'm in this session with someone who's undergone massive trauma, and there's also legal situations happening, and it's a late night session on my end because they're in a different time zone. It's about 11 o'clock and I'm in this room and they're asking me with tears in my eyes, why did this happen and do you think God even cares? We're dropped into an existential conversation that goes beyond the realm of scientific inquiry into healing the nervous system. They're looking for an answer to why bad things happen, which is a religious question. And we sit down for 15-20 minutes. I remember this conversation, trying to anonymize it to the best of my ability. If you're the particular person who I was working with, we did incredible work. I deeply appreciate you. Such a touching moment I'm trying to bring through here. We had this conversation, and I was crying, and they were crying. After a few months of working together, something horrific that they'd been through, many years of suffering and all kinds of drama that was happening still. And we're asking why do bad things happen? And how do we have faith that good things will happen in the future? How can they repair their relationship to God, having been raised in a certain faith and now questioning their faith because of the trauma and the damage that they sustained? And I can't give them the answer, but something that I said in that session, to the essence of faith can't be quantified or measured, and it's something which we can only ever glimmer, so we can only ever peek dimly at first until we go into that realm, go into that space, go into that level of consciousness where we start to see and feel, and then we practice that essence. Language doesn't work to describe the feeling of a lived relationship with God. It's often wordless. If you're talking about God, you're talking around God. You can never penetrate to the center of the circle. If you imagine God like this, it's always going to move out the way or shift out the way. It's fully encompassing. It's both every single word in the book itself, the paper it's written on, and the very nature of the air around the book. God is all-encompassing, therefore how can I possibly speak to it? But the way that we work in a trauma sense is understanding that the role of faith, and spiritual psychology in particular, is life-giving to someone who's gone through massive damage. You can't experience abuse, you can't experience pain and agony and lacerations on your heart without some degree of hope that it could get better and expect to heal. Someone who doesn't have hope will die. They will die a slow death. They will die the apathetic, grey death of gradually going towards hopelessness. And if you've ever met someone like that, or you've ever been in that state, it is truly hell on earth. To be in that blanket of emotional weight, wrapped up and contained, feeling like your heart is a burden and you can't see clearly. You've got the trauma blocking you right up there. God, or our relationship to God, our understanding from the inside out of our own divinity, fingerprint by God, not that we are gods and we should refer to each other as if we were kings and queens and archetypally inflated beings, but to understand our relationship within the divine order of the universe, let's get a bit more New Age, to understand where we are on this whole experience and where we could be if we shifted towards a more hopeful engagement with life, towards believing that we can heal, we can find the love that we deserve, we can feel beautiful on the inside out, and we can build incredible careers and continue to give back to the people who mean so much to us. That's the essence of God as I understand it in a lived, everyday experience. It's faith to the core. My week with clients who are going through trauma is founded on faith. my work behind the scenes, these hundreds of books that I've read, 4 years of my life being obsessive to a point that I recommend no one going to, is to try and find the top 100 and give them to you in a course. Or maybe someone else. Maybe not you in particular. Maybe you don't need this. But that's what I've tried to do. And I'm going to do that. And that's something like my own temperament, my own skill set, my own particular weirdness and inclinations one way or another. Taking the best aspects of all these things, imbuing it with a sense of faith or hope or a desire to give more love out to the world and be a generative force for good, which holds all these things together and helps me to live from a faith-based perspective rather than a fear-based consciousness which is shrinking towards death. Because if we take the conversation of God all the way towards the end point, on the final day that you have on this earth, you will know your relationship to God, because there is no atheist in a foxhole. There is no way to avoid that feeling of the final, and it's over. There's enough stories within spiritual psychology circles and also some of these really out there stories from people who've gone through near-death experiences to have some degree of inclination that there's likely to be something more than this human earthy experience, and you need not be punishing yourself with the whip and believing that you're going down to be Satan's footstool. But I do want you to have a deep understanding and a lived relationship to God which takes this seriously. God can be love and God can be light, but God is also the earthy weight of doing something meaningful, taking responsibility for those around you, doing something of service. And to be of service and to truly be sacrificial means that you don't do things that feel good all the time. And often you do sacrifice that which is of your ego temperament, of your desire naturally. Don't you think over the last 4 years, I would have liked to have maybe done more social things and not be up so late reading the same book over and over again to try and find the essence to then bring forward in the video, because when I scale that out towards thousands of people that watch a video, 1 minute of my time scaled across thousands of people, it's thousands of minutes of human consciousness. I take that seriously. I try not to waste your time. I try not to waste your attention. I try to be as effective and as direct, but also as warm and engaging as I can be with all of this that I put online. And for me, in a very roundabout way, that's my way of having a lived relationship to God. Sure, I pray over my food. I have an incredibly deep relationship to God when I'm in nature. I've had many years of meditative experiences. I've had spiritual breakthroughs of one way or another way. But mystical revelations mean so much less than the earthy, repetitive experience of showing up with faith and serving from a place of good intention, spiritually nourished good intention. And your understanding of what that might mean will depend on if you were raised in a Christian or an Islamic culture, an Eastern culture, or maybe a more, whatever culture. I could name so many different particularities, but the essence of the lived relationship with God, do we need God, is, do you need faith in your life? Do you need hope? Do you need aspiration? Do you need a feeling of being supported beyond the hardships that you've experienced? A feeling that things will be righted one day, and a feeling that there is a greater, deeper, more powerful source of energy beyond your ego, beyond your heart, beyond your individual flesh and your identity, and we call that God. I think we do. I think we do need that as humans, which is why we've got tens of thousands of years of history where human beings truly, automatically, instinctively go towards the same essence, which is there's something beyond us, and let's be reverent and humble before the tradition, whatever it might be. Within a certain community, there's so many issues within institutions, but the essence of a lived religion is something which is felt and something which is acted upon. If you're missing that in your life, consider making the time to try and find what that means for you. You can read these 3 books. You can go into your local church, your local mosque. You can go into a non-denominational, secular, kind of spiritually leaning situation and try and find God in the meditation center. But I strongly suggest that you find what it means for you and you build and defend that relationship like it were a nice fresh glass of water on a very hot day, because that's what it feels like on the inside. And it'll also get you through the hard times when you're staying up late, doing work that you don't necessarily want to do, in a yet another difficult conversation, or doing something that's going out of your way for a family member, or a friend, or a loved one, or even just taking that narrative of godliness and imbuing it into something like going to the gym of, if I did truly want to live in service to God, maybe I'd look after my body, and maybe I'd treat this divine temple truly as a divine temple and not screw myself up with toxic substances. Maybe if I really honored my vessel and I really saw my flesh as divine and inspired and loved by God, I wouldn't pollute myself. Certain stories like that, right? And it's the same with that energy, it's the same with that time. 5 hours in a row scrolling YouTube shorts. Did you do a disservice to yourself and a disservice to God? I'm not going to preach at you, but my personal bias would be, I feel like I'm probably heading towards disservice when I dishonor myself. Because when you look at the nature of the soul, you go into the esoteric theory, and you go deeper into the theology of God, the connections start to be made. That's up to you. I'm not going to preach. I'm not a priest. It's your choice. It's your heart. It's your relationship to God. All I can say is don't ignore the path. Thank you. That's the video. There's the next video.